Thank you for coming back to this episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Brittany Ward from the 21st Agency.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, well, so you're the CEO and founder of your own agency. You started your agency about 7 years ago.
That's right. You were listening. I like it.
Yeah, and so that's phenomenal. You guys have a great location. You're in downtown Tampa, and you're working with some really exciting brands.
Yeah, thank you. So we have been in Tampa now 7 years. We moved downtown to our new office, which is just glorious, nice post-COVID opportunity to continue bringing people in and actually working under the same roof. We love it because we rotate Spotify playlists and have a lot of really fun together. Our clients, some of which are local, and they join us there. Others just regional, national. We get to travel to them and see other parts of the United States. And naturally, everything is Zoom meeting anyway. So it's been great just to find a new home and continue expanding in the area, though.
And downtown's a great place to be, especially if you're working with some of those really, really big brands.
Absolutely. Yeah, it gives us a little cachet, to say we're downtown Tampa. And we've got some awesome food trucks next to us, too, which doesn't hurt. So
I love hearing other entrepreneurs' stories, and especially people who've started advertising and marketing agencies, right? Yeah. So I like... When I was reading through your background, I loved picking up on some of the elements, and I was trying to compare myself to your path, and I think it is a very good path to take if you ultimately want to own an agency one day, is to follow a path similar to yours. Could you give us a little bit of that background?
Yeah, totally. I think to start, it would have been much easier for me understanding where I was going to end up. People, they ask, how did you get into marketing? And I like to joke that I just avoided math classes. So I was always constantly, writing everyone else's paper and coming up with new, fun, creative ideas.
So this wasn't your goal?
It was never my goal.
Okay.
Yeah. And yet here we are. So, what the goal was, I think found me along the way, which was really great. I straight out of college, went to work for a really awesome agency. And,
what'd you study?
I studied communications and Spanish.
Okay.
So, the communications part obviously came fairly naturally. Statistics I actually really loved too, and understanding how and why math made sense. I'm a big why person, I think, ultimately, which is very reflective in all of our work now. But, going to work for this agency out of college and working with some incredible brands, Disney, Aramark, Fox Sports, SeaWorld, pre-Blackfish for everyone listening. But I was exposed to so many really, powerhouse, powerful brand stories and advocacy stories. So that was an incredible sort of launch pad for me into the next 12 years. I worked on the brand side of the business. So internal marketing, after seeing and understanding kind of the pain points and challenges that clients face. I sold restaurant franchises for a bit and ran marketing and communications for Nature's Table Cafe, which then progressed into a large franchise of Buffalo Wild Wings. Got to travel, open new markets, sort of interface with the franchisor and understand licensing and how relevant the brand was from a franchisor, and then taking that into different, towns and places, and really being able to carry that thread all the way through. I went to work for Burger King Corporate, private equity company, which, was a really interesting kind of cultural environment. And
what year was that?
That was in 2014 in Miami. And they had... while I was with the team, they had laid off half of their, right before I joined, they had laid off half their workforce. They had unloaded every franchise location except for 99, all located in Miami-Dade. And they kind of cherry-picked me to come run those flagship store marketing programs. In typical private equity, environment, that role changed multiple times. I ended up working in their test kitchen with our food scientists, helping release new products and creating the marketing plans and sort of brand story for that.
I'm imagining like how many different
fries.
types of Whoppers you can do.
Yeah, chicken fries, the Black Whopper was one of ours. I actually oversaw our consumer insights and focus groups. So we would bring people into this white label facility, hear about, they would taste the burger, tell us how weird they thought it was. And then we decided, can we still launch this? Should we wait?
Yeah. Innovation is an interesting part of marketing.
It was really exciting and very interesting. So I got to work, with them, and then moved back to Tampa to work on World of Beer and helped run a lot of their digital and field marketing strategy, franchise again. What's interesting, Cords, is that each one of these roles, I found myself being pushed closer and closer into the sort of entrepreneurial consulting mindset. And they would open a new department or a new role, and I was always the one like, well, just put Brittany over there. She'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I really started understanding that the reason I loved those positions so much was I wasn't quite a silo to some of the other, very defined
like a traffic coordinator
roles.
or
yes,
something. Right.
Exactly. In fact, one of the positions I found myself, I actually hired a software development company and eliminated my position because the spreadsheets that I was managing was just a system.
Right.
So, which is how I got stuck in the test kitchen eating Big Mac or Whoppers all day and drinking shakes. So, one thing led to the next. To your earlier point of, I didn't know that I wanted to open an agency, but I found myself having these conversations with franchisee business owners, independent store operators, and folks kind of in their own way running their own businesses, and I was there to help solve their problems.
You were nominated.
I was nominated.
You were nominated to start your own
It wasn't
business.
even my decision, yes.
Exactly. Right. Well, with that kind of broad-based experience at that level, you get to learn. You've learned so many different things through like your actual working for someone else's career in terms of you learned about how brands have cycles.
That's right.
SeaWorld, a cycle is going to be very different from Aramark's business cycle.
Totally.
And it's logical, right? But Disney's parks cycle is going to be similar to SeaWorld's, and there's reasons why that is. And so you learn about those pieces with those brands, and then you learn about, okay, I've got to come up with a marketing campaign that can be executed by 90 different storefronts.
Exactly.
In a matter of a couple of days.
Yep.
And there's mailing and printing and clinging and all these different things that have to get done in order to execute that. And so what ends up happening, in my opinion, just to kind of bounce this off of you, but in my opinion, you start to become this person that has enough experience and expertise that like everybody's asking you questions.
Exactly.
And then it's like, okay, well, I might as well get paid for this.
Yeah.
And now you have an agency.
I could not have put it more succinctly, especially coming from a kid with a quota of questions that, okay, Brittany, we've asked enough now. It's time to move on. And now that really being, a strength in my professional endeavors, because I was never scared to ask why and how it worked. And ultimately, to your point, led me to a place where I could be kind of the thought leader or expert in the room because I had, enough knowledge in places that was really meaningful and could make an impact in people's businesses.
Yeah.
And, today I feel like that's why I really love what our agency is able to accomplish, because we're not a copy paste agency that, there is a need for that, certainly.
Yeah.
But for me as an individual, I always wanted to be able to cross-pollinate solutions and figure out how, an entertainment park could help our B2B association, right? And there doesn't always necessarily seem to be a clear thread, but it really promotes creativity and problem solving and critical thinking, ultimately.
I love the creativity involved.
Yeah.
In moments where this thing's never been done before. There's a point where for myself where I felt like I was able to accomplish enough, where I would have enough confidence, where I got really, really comfortable in situations where it had never been done before.
Exactly.
These two things have never talked to one another, or you come up with some new idea because you can see how the connections could be made. And I think that's where like businesses can really leverage people who are very comfortable in that space, because they've got a lot on the line and they get a lot on their mind.
Totally.
Right. And so you can come in and you can help give them strategies, and then of course execute those strategies, because I think there's a huge difference. It's like, you're talking about your Burger King marketing. Like you can go in and do the cool, flashy stuff, but if it can't be executed, then that idea is worthless.
I love that you said that out loud, because I feel like, the secret sauce most people think is kind of that kernel of an idea.
Yeah.
And if we give the kernel of the idea away, then what are we left with? And I actually tend to disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think, a good idea can come from anyone in the room at any point. You don't have to be a marketer or the most senior, certainly in the room. But if you can't execute it or lay the groundwork to really dig in and figure out how can we get this done, it's no better than the kernel of the piece of corn unpopped, right?
Right.
So nobody's going to eat that.
Well, those are we call those boomerang moments.
Yeah.
Because I may propose an idea, or we might have several ideas that can all be executed, and a lot of times we can share those with a client or with someone who is just a friend or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, if it was me, this is what I would do if I were trying to do this the right way, or if I was bootstrapping it or whatever.
Right.
I'm happy to give away a lot of that information, because most people don't have the ability to get it done. Mm-hmm. And when they can't get it done, well, guess whose phone's ringing?
Exactly.
Right. So
yeah.
Anyhow, it's all good. It's actually better if somebody's tried it and not succeeded at it, because
then they appreciate what needs to be done in order to achieve this goal or how to accomplish it.
And not just emotionally, but like financially. They're like, well, totally. It took 20 hours a week of my time. Well, what is that worth to you? It's like, okay, well, if I can make that go away and you could get it done better than you thought,
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a need for what we do, for sure.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Well, at least it'll take a little longer for us to get replaced by AI, I think.
Seriously. I think, though, that, speaking of AI and how far it's come in such a short amount of time, it's really interesting to watch those that have really gravitated towards it and already started sort of spinning it into their processes. Yeah. And, others who are like, oh, no, we can't touch this. This is a big no-no. It's going to take over. Yeah. And I think, kind of where we're going to vet out into the balance of utilizing it in a really smart way. I've been interviewing for a couple positions and within our agency, and one of my interview questions has now become, have you used AI before? And if so, how?
Right.
And these are for, some more junior positions and younger folks that I was really expecting out of the gate for all of them to say, oh, yes, immediately, and maybe it's the I don't want my employer to know that I'm using it. But I think the folks that, have responded in a way that feels excited and passionate and really wants to enable their own skill set through the use of the tool are going to be the next generation of really successful people. And I think businesses and agencies too that are able to bring it into their work stream in a really powerful way.
Well, I can tell you, when I first saw the latest version of ChatGPT, the version 4, I immediately, I was like, oh my God, I cannot sleep, because it was so good at a lot of the things that we get paid for.
Totally.
And so initially I was like, man, this is too easy. But then I would catch.
Someone's going to find out.
Yeah, well, I would.
How will they know?
I would catch little things, and it's like if you if you didn't actually have the experience, you would have totally done
Yes.
this other thing. Like there's 10 things here, 9 of them are 100% right, but one of them is like really
the
bad
landmine
idea.
you're going to step
like
on.
a really bad idea. And that one is going to cause 75% of the pain. And if you just blindly take these answers that are given to you with so much confidence and authority, that you can really get caught. And I think it's obviously going to get better at determining things, and especially when you talk about things that are more popular. Like if we were using ChatGPT for fast food marketing, there's so much of it out there.
Yes.
It's got a huge database about that. But if we were talking about some obscure portion of an industry that has high barriers to entry,
how would you know?
It's not good. Well, yeah. I mean, it might point us to a lot of the answers really, really quickly, but like that's just step one. It's like call it the pencil to the paper. You then have to turn on more traditional research and go, I'm going to research that thread and that thread and that thread. I'm going to ask these questions and I'm going to ask it again.
Totally.
And it's like, and you start to figure out the complete picture of like, okay, what is true? What does it actually know? And what is actually true and what will work in the real world. And
I think you raise a really great point that even I haven't necessarily thought all the way through, but the understanding of, knowledge outside of AI and sort of what it's spitting out versus what you need to go back and validate. We've seen in traditional media for years and years, and people just expect the information to come to you correctly.
Right.
The next iteration of that was social media and sort of consumer journalism and reporting and resharing and Mom, stop sending me the chain letters with the incorrect information.
Oh my God. My mom calls me about what she saw on the news twice a month. She's like, you have to dial this phone number. Yeah. Yeah, it's the latest toy.
Yeah, or like it's actually the lobbyist website that you're looking at. Yeah. Not to digress, but I think the point is this is a great tool that still needs to be vetted and needs human oversight to really understand, at least from experience. Now, I think a lot of the more entry-level positions, one of two things will happen, right? It's going to challenge them to make them better and smarter at their trade.
Yeah. Get done twice as much using the AI.
Yes, exactly. Or the folks who weren't good at it to start with are going to find a new industry and a new position that's better suited. Yeah. Because you can't be mediocre anymore when there's tools that are mediocre to enable you to be better.
Right. Yeah, you will 100% get replaced or not get started if you can't be as good as the AI tool.
Exactly right. Yeah. But even, from like a creative standpoint and, copywriting is what it is, but now kind of the mid-journeys of from a creative agency, I'm sure you can attest.
Generative AI is unbelievable.
It's wild. It's changing so many really cool ways that you can integrate client ideas that you either didn't have the time or bandwidth or even the budget, right, to create these items, even just as inspirational of, this is what we could do for you and for your brand. Now you have access very quickly to turn it on and it'll spit out some wild things.
Midjourney is, so there's ChatGPT, and that is very good for language and for understanding concepts and things like that. And then there's tools like Midjourney that are just so far out there. I mean, in my opinion, it's almost equally as powerful in terms of like artwork mashing together concepts and doing some things that would be impossible to do with people.
Absolutely.
Like for example, I mean, and it's going to it's revolutionizing just the way, and we use both of those tools here. And we've used it to create social media campaigns. I think that we're barely scratching the surface, and I know it's going to completely change our worlds. And in my opinion, that companies like ours and on behalf of our clients, pedal needs to be all the way to the floor, utilizing these tools as much as possible, because you're going to create outputs that are, especially when vetted by a real human, you're going to create outputs that are markedly out in front of your competition.
Very clearly. Yeah. I think, for us, working with some large enterprise size clients, but having a team that's small and nimble,
Right.
and is able to sort of hop on whatever the latest technology is and start utilizing in our work streams, and able to kind of think ahead of even the curve, because we want to play with it first. It's fun.
Right.
And so what can we figure out how to use it for and how to deploy it internally, as we're really just sort of using it like a consumer would, and then translating it into, okay, what's the next phase of this for a client campaign, or how can we, just inspirationally create an idea that will get some like juices flowing. And
like, for example, there's a really big movie out now called the Barbie movie, right?
Never heard of it. Sorry.
Right.
I
And
don't,
so, yeah, I can't imagine that you've heard of Barbie.
Sure.
But I would guarantee you that if you went into Midjourney and you said, I want to create a Barbie styled Land Rover,
Yes.
you're going to get some very good pink Land Rovers that look like they are would be very well suited inside of a plastic environment, because it understands things like Barbie, right? And any of those campaigns that might go with it, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. And I'm excited to see kind of what's next in the iteration. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, and how it's really, you're going to be able to start pulling it actively. I think what's really interesting, though, is to see how the consumer feels about it. Because I'm already sensing this bit of sentiment around, well, we don't want to be lied to. And for you and I, it's I hate to break it to you, but
you've been lied to for 100 years.
Yeah.
There was a
it's
book.
Just storytelling, and entertainment.
It really is.
And
There's a book that I've told a few people about that I came across. I was presented an opportunity to work with a political campaign on the marketing side, and I've done it here and there before, but it was a bigger campaign, and I was like, man, if I'm going to do this, I better do my homework.
Sure.
And so I just went back through just the body of knowledge of okay, what were the earliest books written about political marketing? And I found this book called Propaganda by a guy named Edward Bernays, and it was written in the early 1900s, maybe around World War I time, maybe a little after World War I. And it was talking about influencers and about how powerful influencers can be when utilized as a marketing tool.
Sure.
And they were talking about how they did it. Well, back then, influencers were people, because film, there was printing press, so you could get some black and white pictures and things like that, but dignitaries, kings, queens, those types of people were very well followed in the news, right?
In the purest sense of influence.
Yeah, exactly.
These are the key influencers of their time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there were those types of influencers, and then motion pictures were brand new. So the people from Broadway were all of a sudden, because it was silent films back then, but they could act, because people started okay, well, let's go ahead and get somebody that already knows how to depict and act out this
performative.
Perform it, right? And so now all of a sudden you got this tool that can amplify this person out to millions of people, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of people. And now what they wore, in terms of their styles, the fabrics, whatever. And there was a story in there about how just we've heard of Got Milk, right? So it's America's Dairy Farmers, right? Well, there was a felt consortium, right?
Yes.
And so they were trying to sell more felt. And so I don't know if you remember pictures from the 1920s, but it was a pretty popular style hat, those cute flapper hats, for a lot of those were felt. And so the whole campaign was, let's start dressing people on the red carpets with, these felt hats. And before you know it, they're selling a ton of felt. And that is exactly what we do today with influencer marketing.
It is. Yeah, I agree. And I think that to take it, that far back and really unwind the reason influencer marketing works, which is copycat is the most sincere form of flattery, right? And when you idealize someone or have aspirational goals towards something, you're watching and looking at who are the people in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And how can I recreate this for myself? I think is kind of that thread of emotion that we're all wanting to tap when it comes to influencer marketing.
So you're saying like the reason it works is because people are watching it and going, man, I really want that for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's word of mouth marketing 101, right? It's creating these relationships that we do for our clients nowadays in really tying that thread all the way through of how you can align their brand story with this aspirational idea of, I want that, I want to be that, I want to have that, I want to travel with that, I want to experience that, I want to eat that.
Way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And because social media now has made people's lives and stories so accessible, you, without even having to buy it, you can follow along the story, and that's sort of media. That's like the highest awareness media level from like a traditional sense that a TV commercial, right, or motion picture film was doing. And now we can go all the way down to this like opportunity today where you can actually converse with someone about the shoes they're wearing and you've never met them.
Right.
Or the meal they ate and how was it, right? Or the vacation or the travel or the hotel they were in, or whatever, the Barbie movie they just saw.
Right.
It's made it so much more accessible for influencers to have influence because it's no longer just a one-way push, which traditional media has been forever and ever, right? It can be a pull of how was your experience with this same product or service or travel, and being able to actually craft communities out of it has been really cool that you just didn't have access before, right? I mean, you can't do that from a TV commercial or a newspaper or a billboard so it's been really fun just to watch how it's changed, advertising and influencer, sort of the original word of mouth marketing is impacting so many different arenas now.
It seems so simple. When you explain it that way. It's like, oh yeah, just go out and build a community around your tumbler or your vacuum insulated cooler or whatever. But it's not that simple.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work that goes into creating communities and telling the stories in a way that land the right way. They have to be authentic, and a lot of times. Some things don't have to be authentic.
No,
but it has to be believable.
Right.
It can't come across fake.
I think that's why you've seen a lot of backlash. I'm going to forget. I think it might be Christina Applegate recently, whose name was just tied to a new launch of a liquor brand.
Okay.
Right, and then it comes out she doesn't drink, so doesn't work. Right. I think a lot of what you're seeing now, because there's really authentic communities and self-selection of I'm going to align myself and follow this celebrity at the macro level, and they're very much championing the version of this online celebrity. And if she steps out of line, well, we're going to check her, right? Like, we know your life and we are so involved in that community. And the same goes for at the smallest level of sort of micro influencers that are deployed for different collaborations with brands or building their own communities. It enhances this idea around like-minded people coming together in a collective. And that's why you have influence over those folks. But to your point, it's not as simple as like, well, she drinks water, so she's probably a good fit for our water campaign, right?
Yeah.
We've had clients come to us really interesting from a sort of consumer lifestyle goods, and they want to market a product. And they've done influencer marketing, and it didn't work. And so the first question is why, right?
Yeah, this is the boomerang.
Yeah, this is the boomerang.
Right.
Here it is. And, come to find out they're selling women's products, and they're influencers. While they're women, all their followers were men.
It happens.
You know? So,
Yeah.
of course, you're not going to sell women's products because all of the men who follow along this beautiful woman's Instagram feed are not interested in
They're not.
buying her shoes.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
they want to befriend her in other ways. But it is so selective. Your campaign needs to be very selective with how you partner with people, who they are. Do they really embody, you know, your brand ethos? And also, you know, kind
Right.
of to the original point is like, what is your goal? Because if impressions and reach is your goal, you might be better served with, you know, a Google campaign than trying to partner with an authentic content creator
Yeah.
who has a very niche audience and community, dedicated community that they have influence over. But you're at the life cycle of your brand where you need a big bang of awareness.
Right.
And sometimes it's a combination of the two, right? So it's really how you think through the execution of it and the boomerang
Right.
that will enable success or failure.
And I like what you just said. It's not just an influencer; they are content creators.
That's right.
It's in a lot of times they do the creation for themselves,
Yeah.
especially early on.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to do it really well down the road, I mean, you're talking about it's a ton of work.
It's a ton of work, and it's a talent that not everyone possesses, right? Because if you have your own channel or platform and you're creating content on behalf of yourself or your family or your business, it doesn't always translate. So, prime example, we have one of our clients is DoorDash Delivery,
Yeah.
and we help execute a influencer ambassador program based around esports and gamers.
Yeah.
And so what we have found in reaching out to gamers who don't want to leave their console for, 24 hours when a new game releases, but they need food or toilet paper
Right.
or batteries.
They don't even want to go to the front door to get
They
it.
don't. Yeah. Honestly, it's like we had this whole campaign around stay in your game. Like no one wants to
Yeah.
pause to like get up and
Right.
get the food.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we have found these folks who are gamers and influencers, content creators, and they're great on Twitch. They want to stream their game live. They want to chat with people, live in the chat. And then as it relates to creating content on behalf of DoorDash, they can't execute it. They don't know how to do it. So we've had to pivot
Yeah.
pretty quickly in order to assimilate closer to a content creator than a streamer or a gamer, which at first glance, would seem like it's the same person, right? But peeling those layers back of a campaign to make sure that they can tell your brand story,
Right.
not just tell their own story, is really where the pairing, fits nicely.
Golly, I mean, that is an important distinction because when you think about someone who is a content creator, they're really an ambassador. They're like
That's it.
they're ambassador for a number of things or a few things. And then there's people who are like really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And people want to follow them. That's like more like your like high performing athletes or whatnot. Like they're
Exactly.
just like very, very high performing in certain things. But that doesn't make them a content creator.
It doesn't.
They make that kind of content,
Yeah.
but they might not be able to teach something or explain something or
That's exactly right.
gain this virtual sort of affinity towards
Mm-hmm.
themselves or like virtually make 10,000 friends in 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's also, I think it speaks to like where we are as humanity on social media and
Yeah.
how it's changed so drastically, so quickly from this, perfection of Instagram and the aesthetic and the feed to,
Yeah.
YouTube shorts and TikTok of
Right.
imperfection is now the gold standard.
Really?
And if you appear, overproduced or commercialized, Gen Z specifically, no human really wants to be sold to. So as soon as it starts to feel like an ad from a content creator or an
Yeah.
ambassador, it's just an immediate swipe, right?
Yeah.
And so how we pair and partner with these content creators to form these relationships as an ambassador, to your point, really has a lot to do with how they're able to authentically tell the story, like
Right.
any good marketer has to be able to. So, one of the things that we, out of the gate, we tell them is like, we don't want you to make an ad. we want you to make a TikTok with DoorDash.
Yeah.
Right. And so
explain the difference.
Yeah. I mean,
what would they look like? How would they look different?
It's a great point. And having gone through now iterations of this, really reformatting sort of our brief process and how we're articulating the brand to them so they know how to tell it through their own lens. So example being, commercial is, I use DoorDash every time I'm gaming and every time I order, Cheetos and Mountain Dew and it arrives in 30 seconds. Like, it's very clearly an ad, right?
Right.
All of those data points could actually be true as well, by the way. Right. But one of our content creators that just produced something that we all just had us in tears in the office. He shot it from the perspective of his Ring doorbell. Yeah. And he acted as the delivery man carrying the red DoorDash bag and the bucket hat. And he rings the doorbell and, it's his voice on the other side. And it says, just drop it. And himself, to himself, what do you mean? He said, no, just drop it. And he starts breakdancing, he's twerking, he drops it. Yeah. He takes the bag,
drop it low.
Yeah, right?
Exactly right.
That's a TikTok. That's a piece of content that is exciting and fun and interesting.
And that's a story too.
And guess what? Right. There's so much brand affinity and positive sentiment coming out of that, rather than him just looking at the camera and saying, well, my DoorDash arrived very quickly today.
No, but I love it because that example is actually speaking from the voice of the gamer. They're like, just drop it. Just drop it. I got to get back to my game. Just drop it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we all had a heyday, a ton of fun with that. And it's kind of become the gold standard now of how can we give people inspiration and content creators, whether for this or other clients of, there's a way to film and to partner with people who get it.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, really important point. And there is this element of getting it.
Yeah.
That it takes, I want to say it's almost like years of experience to get it. Mm-hmm. Where if you're trying to create content for this audience, you can't just come in from the outside and do it. That's why you have to pull in people who have been doing it.
Totally.
And have real conversations with them about what are those challenges and what would that look like? Mm-hmm. Right. And then all of a sudden it's you can help facilitate pulling the answer out of them.
I think, from the content creator's perspective, obviously it's easier if you grew up in a time where it's just native to you. You didn't know life before social media, if you will, or a phone in your hand or a camera in your hand. I think from the brand perspective too, there's caused, the impact has been these conversations we have to have with our clients up front about, we think this is going to work. Yeah. This may not be how you intended your brand to show up on TikTok. Yeah. But here's why. Yeah. And this is sort of the path to creating this really strong community of people, because I think you could probably attest, most people just, okay, what are the key talking points and what are the facts and how are we going to get it to our target audience in the most impactful way? And
Did you hit 3 of the 5 benefits?
Yes.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah. Benefit, not feature, and how do we craft in 30 seconds, this message. And it's kind of all bets are off. You really have to participate in a way that is meaningful to your target audience, but also, native to the platform. It's you wouldn't put a TikTok on TV, but you wouldn't put a TV commercial on TikTok either. And I think that gets lost sometimes.
Yeah. And to me, you're 100%. There is a different mode of communication across each platform. Even between social, TikTok is its own video platform. You've got YouTube,
right?
And then you've got Instagram and YouTube are trying to get down into the TikTok space. But I think what's interesting is that we're discovering a lot about ourselves, just as humans, and how those dopamine drips are generated and where we're vulnerable and really understanding the messaging of how we're receiving communication. And I think that's one of the things I try to pay very, very close attention to when I'm consuming any type of media, if I'm reading the news online or, watching a movie or just just experience doing life, right? I'm always just sort of like looking at, like, was somebody just directing something to me? Almost like looking at architecture of buildings. It's like, okay, like what style is that? Well, it's the same way when it comes to communication, because there are if you break it down to the science of it, there are ways to communicate and to get into, like, as an earworm, you know?
Absolutely. I think, the thought around, you had mentioned earlier AI and now influencers, and how even those are crossing over into like what's believable. I mean, there are AI generated influencers now of non-human humans with accounts publishing content and pushing information. It's a good thing you read propaganda, so firsthand that we can really be influenced by fake news or even just a fake human being. It's like you really have to be so much more discerning and have a vision of how you want to execute your brand, or who the content creator should be. And as a consumer now too, I think you have to be smarter than ever to be discerning of how you're going to buy things, or how you're going to be influenced, or how you're spending your time on these different platforms, because it will steer you if you're not steering it.
Well, you're 100% correct. And I think that's where the future, if we want to talk about the future for a second, there's a crypto coin that was just launched by OpenAI. And in order to have that coin or be able to buy that coin, you have to verify that you're a real person with a retinal scan. So in my conversations with people talking
that
about...
actually makes me kind of happy that they're creating these checks and balances.
It's a double-edged sword, because if they're connecting your currency to your biometrics...
True.
Then they can also like give you social credit scores and turn off your money if you're not behaving well.
That's right.
But that's the downside, and the really true, scary, dystopian future of it all, which there has, like, I don't know how you avoid that, but it is like the natural gravity of where it's going. But that is interesting. A lot of the people I've talked to about Web 3.0 are talking about, it is blockchain based, right? So there's this beautiful log of like every interactivity that has to do with the information or the currency or the product.
It's recorded.
Or whatever it is that you have. But there's this component of like authenticity that somehow we're going to have to validate. And we're going to have to get somebody on here a lot smarter than me to tell us how...
what that even looks like.
What that could look like in a checks and balances type of way. But that is a big part of where it's going, is we're going to have to tell, as consumers of this media, we're going to have to keep track of what's real and what's not.
Yeah. How we do that is a great question. I have loved following, all the advances on blockchain and the new ways people are deploying it, initially obviously from monetization to crypto to art, and now seeing it sort of run rampant even in media, and sort of recording what used to be trafficked now through blockchain and all these other wild use cases. But I think that is kind of the beauty of technology too. And when ChatGPT was released, understanding then how this sort of unbranded platform already was kind of sneaking into the world of news and subscription models, right? And so how then can you tie sort of this unbranded white label back into the place that you and I are comfortable talking about, which is like paid media and placements and creative campaigns, and how can you infiltrate one with the other? And now will your PPC keyword come to the top of your ChatGPT recommendation versus, like a native web page or something?
How do you rank on AI?
Yeah, and then, how is it all recorded, and how is it validated, and how can one sort of bleed into the other? I think it would be a really interesting conversation of how all these, independent pieces people are exploring kind of come and tie back together to make it even better. It's kind of like the Mid-Journey situation, right? Of creating that ChatGPT thread to Mid-Journey to creative to but the world is changing fast. It's crazy.
That's a great point to end on, because it is changing super fast. We're going to look back on this period of time and go, man, that is when it started changing very, very fast. Mm-hmm. I just hope we're looking back from a better place.
Totally. From Mars. No.
Definitely not Mars. Yeah. But I hope we're looking back from a better place, and the world gets to be a better place. But anyhow, thanks for coming in and talking with me
this is a lot of fun.
about these things. I mean, this is what we deal with every single day, and
definitely
it's got to be one of the most fun jobs that you could possibly have, is dealing with this diversity of companies and diversities of people, and diversity of goals. And you're just a problem solver all day long. Yep,
you got it. That's what makes it fun and enjoyable, and also getting to talk to other people, like-minded like you, and how we can make the world a better place.
Sure, absolutely. Where can people follow you or find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn under Brittany Ward, or the 21st Agency. You can also find us on TikTok at the21A, or Instagram the21A, if you want to follow along what we're doing there.
That's awesome. We'll definitely check that out. Great. And you can follow us anywhere where podcasts are found, and on the Law of Relevancy social feeds and website, and the Bake More Pies feeds. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next time.